in the hashtag out of school model channel on Slack. I think a lot of you have not yet joined that channel, and I sent some of you invitations. Beth is going through and helping to invite some of you. That's where we're posting some of the information from this call and where you can post any questions that you have. So if you need to take a second and do that, or if you have any questions on how to do that, please make sure that you are in the out of school model channel. So similar to our O&I calls, please make sure that you have your phone or computer on mute unless you're asking a question or a comment. And if you could, just after the call, private message me on Slack if you had a question that went unanswered or unaddressed. And I am recording this webinar, so if you have a coworker or a specialist that is unable to attend, I will send out a link to this, the recorded version of this on YouTube for anyone to watch if they're unable to attend right now. So just again, reminding ourselves of our vision and mission, why we're doing what we're doing every day. Our vision is that every young adult is educated, employed, and career-bound, and our mission is to equip young adults with the skills to overcome barriers and win in education, employment, and as citizens. Today, we are going to be focusing on really one main topic, entering model services for out-of-school specialists into ENDMS. So this is something that we've noticed as we are expanding our out-of-school programming, that we need to be providing you all with some more support on and some more specifics around exactly what the expectations are, and to make sure that we're meeting the expectations that JAG has for us, and to really show that the work that you all are doing every day with all of our students and participants. So to make this kind of easy for you, I did upload a document into that Slack channel, a PDF document called Out of School Model Service Expectations. So I'm just going to pull that up on the screen right here so that you all can see it, and feel free to open it on your end if you are on that Slack channel. And this is really what I'll be talking through today, and you can reference this in the future, or you can have send this out to your specialist to reference as well. So I tried to really break it down for us to make it super clear, to make sure that exactly what we expect regarding model services is super clear. Basically, when it comes to model services, the expectation, and this is specifically for out-of-school specialists, that a minimum of one model service entry is entered into ENDMS for each student each week. So each student on your active roster. So this is not students in follow-up, just students that are on your active roster. And really any contact that you are having with the student or that is supporting the student, which I'll go into in a little bit of detail in a minute, should be entered into ENDMS. And so this is really a couple of reasons why this is important. It's capturing the work that you're doing for yourselves, for our reporting, and for meeting our goals of the 80 hours of contact per student for out of school. So going on to the why down there, like I said, it's just showing the work that you're actively doing to provide services to students, and that you are working toward meeting that out-of-school contact hour goal of 80 hours per student. So a lot of you, and we've discussed this before, you've probably heard Jan or Beth or I mention that we know that 80 hours per student can seem like a really big number, and we know that that's not necessarily the most realistic expectation for all of the students that you have enrolled, especially considering that some of your students might not even be enrolled in the active phase of the program for a full calendar year. Like if you get a student in who's very close to achieving their GED, you know, they only might be on your roster, active roster, for a couple of months. And that's totally understandable. The way that it breaks down is that if you divide 80 hours by 12 months, it's about 1.5 hours a week per participant. So regardless of whether you're actually getting to that full 80 hours or not for a full calendar year, the 1.5 hours per week is more what we're kind of looking for in the model service entries. And we're going to talk in a little bit about if there are students who are disengaged from the program, what to do with them. But for the students that are engaged, it's really important that you are capturing any and all work that you're doing with them and working towards this contact hour goal. And also it just really shows the services that you're providing and proves the value of our J&G programming when you're consistently entering that model service minimum. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that in just a second, but are there any questions right now just on that expectation that might be a little bit new for some of you? So I'm just going to stop and allow any questions if you have any. Okay, great. The first common question that we get from our out-of-school specialists that I wanted to address here is, what if I see a student less than once a week? So this is quite common amongst our out-of-school students, that they are not necessarily coming into your centers or wherever you're providing services. They're not necessarily coming in on a weekly basis or more than once a week. So our answer here is that in order to adequately deliver services to students, you should be engaging with them or their service providers on a weekly basis in some form. So these methods of engagement can include connecting with a student via phone, text, or social media, so it does not necessarily have to be in person with the student. Checking in with partners providing services to the student, such as their GED coaches, an adult ed instructor, a parole officer, etc. And having informal conversations with the students. So even if they are not necessarily in a formal workshop with you or a formal event, if you're just having an informal mentoring or coaching conversation, we really encourage you to be entering that, because that is definitely showing the work that you're doing with them. So here's an example of some model service entries. And as you can see, for the length of time here, this is not necessarily achieving the 1.5 hour a week goal, but I think that this is a very realistic. So this was pulled from, this is a very similar entry that I saw on one of our out-of-school specialists ENDMS profiles. And I think that it just really shows what really good model services would look like. So they're being entered on a weekly basis, and even if the student here, Chris, is not actually coming into the service center, even if the specialist is not able to actually connect with him, something is being entered to reflect the efforts that are being made or the connections that are being made here. So for example, if the first one here would be a guidance counseling contact, and the narrative is that Chris came into the service center, the specialist provided him with a bus pass, and they connected about his job and scheduled a meeting for the following week. The following week, he did not come to their scheduled meeting, and he was not able to reach him by phone, but the specialist reached out directly to the GED service provider. So that is still a 15-minute contact that you can be entering to show that you're following up, you're still providing support for the student. This is just a great way to kind of show and capture what the work that you're doing. Similar in this case here, not able to reach the student, but connecting with the MRS case manager and just documenting that. And then at the top one, if you're texting with a student, speaking with them over the phone, talking over social media, you know, connecting on any of the barriers that they're facing. That's just definitely guidance counseling, and you're definitely providing the student with services. In terms of the competencies, we've kind of addressed this before. It should always be an O competency, so one of the out-of-school ones. O20 is a very common one that's kind of like a life skills catch-all competency. And then the W competencies are also options for entering there. I forgot to say at the beginning that Beth is on the call with us today, so I was going to ask if Beth, do you have anything to add to this section specifically that I missed, or do you think I covered this pretty well?
No, I think you covered it well. The only thing I would add is that, especially if you are adding model services for a student that you did not have direct contact with, make sure that you put some sort of comment about not only who you reached out to, but maybe how you contacted them. So if there is some instance where someone else needs to reach out to that same person, say, you know, a new specialist comes on or something like that, that they're able to find out how to get in touch with that person or to know who it is to continue contact that way.
Okay. So that's just an example of a student who is engaged in JMG and the kind of entries that you can be entering for them from auto services. Scrolling down this sheet, another common question that we get from our out-of-school specialists is, what if a student is on my roster but is no longer engaged in JMG? And this is a question that we are kind of working on as a larger team to come up with an answer moving forward. So Jan and Mary and Beth and I, and working with JAG National, to be very clear about how either removing a student from a roster or putting an end date on their roster would affect the data that you've already entered. We don't have a super clear answer on that yet, and we want to make sure that we know exactly what that answer is before we tell you exactly what to do. So for the time being, the direction is basically, if there's a student that that is unengaged or disengaged and that you are kind of struggling to get in contact with, basically we're going with the decision that for 2 months, document weekly attempts to re-engage the student, and then after that, just communicate with your manager, or if you are a manager, your specialist should be communicating with you that basically the student, you cannot contact them, or they are showing that they are not interested in the program, and then enter some type of model service monthly, which is what the WIOA expectation is. So essentially, whatever kind of case note you would be entering for WIOA, just put that into JMG. In this case, if it's something that you're copying and pasting, for example, this example here that you see on the screen is acceptable. So in this case, you would be putting in a length of 15 minutes. That would be the maximum length if you were actually not making any contact with them, because there is still time being spent. You still want to document that you are putting an effort to contact or engage the student into the program. One thing important to note is that at the end of a program year, so for example, the end of June, if you have a out-of-school student who, in this case, Brittany, that is not engaged in JMG, and you have made multiple attempts to engage her and she is not engaged, do not roll her over onto your new roster for the next year. We noticed that that may have happened in the past, that there were some students that were rolled over onto the new roster that were already kind of disengaged last spring or last winter. So basically, she would just stay on this year's roster as an active student, but she would not move on to next year's roster if she is a disengaged student. Is there any clarification around that, Beth, that you have to add?
No, I would just ensure that before you decide to not roll over a student, make sure you've had that conversation with your manager so they're aware how your number of enrollments might be fluctuating. And also make sure that you have made those documented attempts to contact the student prior to deciding to not carry them over.
Yeah, great. So are there any questions on those 2 points at this point about the model services? Okay, so again, if you have any questions while we're going, just feel free to type them in the Skype chat into the Slack chat, and Beth will be sure to answer them. Okay, so Steve has a question. What is the exact date that marks the beginning of a new year, and when should we have the students off of your roster by? So is it July 1st?
Yeah, so June 30th is the end of one program year, and then the start for the new roster will be July 1st.
Yeah, and so the way that, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't done this yet, Beth, but Steve, the way that it would work is you'll actually create a new roster for the new school year, so it would be like a 2017-2018 roster, and you will have to physically move students over to it. So if there were students who are disengaged, you just won't select their names to move them onto the new roster. You don't have to actually take them off. So I'm going to show you now how to enter model services in ENDMS. Some of you might be pros at this. Some of you might need a little bit of guidance. So on the home page, you just click on Enter Model Services. And then over here, you can pick, you won't see all the regions like I do, but you'll pick whichever you're going to enter them for. So I'm just going to pick one for one of our out-of-school programs. And once you select a roster, it should populate like this where you can see multiple students to enter it for. You would select the date. So if we were putting one in for today, the length of time that you spent with that student or students, and the activity. So this is that document that I sent out a while ago that kind of clarified what each activity is. Some of them are going to be quite different for out of school. So for example, a lot of it will fall under guidance counseling, the one-on-one phone calls. Academic remediation would be anything that you're doing in support of their GED attainment or high school completion attainment. So if you're connecting with their providers, that's definitely something you can be capturing here. So let's say that that's what you did. You were connecting with their GED providers, so that could be academic remediation. So your narrative would describe that. I went to the GED provider office and asked for an update on Beth's work toward her GED. She said that Beth has one more test to take or to pass, which is math. So for the levels, this is somewhat arbitrary when it comes to things like this for out of school. It's really not that big of a deal which level you pick. For this, I would probably just say level 1 since the student isn't really actually working toward a competency here. And then for the competency, again, we want to stick with the O's or the W's. In this case, I would probably select one of the W's, which are down at the bottom, and maybe select tutoring, study skills, training and instruction, or the comprehensive guidance and counseling. So that could be your competency. You would pick the student that you were referring to and then submit. So somewhat self-explanatory, but you can also pick multiple students or an entire class that you have enrolled here, which helps if you have multiple kids that you're doing some kind of activity with, like those of you who went to Legislative Day, you can just pick all of their names and enter one model service for Legislative Day there. Something else that's very helpful when it comes to ENDMS is there is a help screen. And when you pull that up, there's table of contents. So for any of you who are new to ENDMS or kind of getting reacquainted with it, everything, so unfortunately there aren't really any videos here. I'm working on making some of those, but it does have just a description of how to use these different parts of ENDMS. So you can basically select model services, and then it will describe what you need to do for entering that. So if you get lost again and you aren't really sure how to enter model services, come back here to the help screen and it can help explain how to do that for you. Does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, Deborah, go ahead. If you can just either type it in Slack or you can share out by just unmuting yourself.
Yes, I have a question about the W competency that mentions follow-up. Is that just for students who are in follow-up, or can it be that you're following up to a previous phone call?
That's a good question. Let me look back at what she's referring to, what Deborah's referring to here is this follow-up services. I actually do know the answer to that question, Beth, because the way it's worded, I would think what you're saying, I would think it is just for follow-up, like if a student is in follow-up, but that wouldn't make sense because you don't enter model services for students in follow-up.
Yeah, so Deborah, this is Beth. I don't have a definite answer for you on that. I see where it could be confusing. But Kara's correct in that when a student is in follow-up, you typically do not enter any model services during that time. So I would think we could conclude that it could be used for doing some sort of, following up during active phase. I'll see if I can get a definite answer and get back with you on that, because I see how that could be confusing. So sorry, I'm sure that didn't help very much. I will see if we can get you a definite answer.
Yeah, but it is a good question. So while we've got you there, Deborah, I was going to ask if you and any other specialists, so Steve specifically, and then I know there's a couple other ones on the call who have kind of gotten a good routine of consistently entering model services. If you kind of share just some of your best practices for this, because I know you all have 1,000,001 different things in your plates every day, and this is kind of one of those things where it's like probably at the bottom of the rung in terms of priorities. So if there's just like a best practice that you both could share, or anyone else, for how you remember to keep on top of this, or just like an easy way to do it, just basically like what are you doing to consistently keep up with this data?
Okay, sure. I typically try to enter all of my model services on Fridays.
Okay.
I did learn today, just now, that for the youth that I have lost touch with a little bit, I still need to enter something once a week, and I usually kind of follow the WIOA guidelines, and I'll enter something maybe once a month, so I need to improve on that. But when I do update a model service, I try to follow closely with some of the WIOA guidelines. So I want to make sure that in the model service I have addressed their barriers that they, or any of their barriers that they had when they first were enrolled.
Okay, great. So could you give an example of that?
Oh, geez.
So like you're.
So if is that they're a dropout, which obviously all of our youth are. Most of them are.
Mm-hmm.
I will enter how they're doing in GED class and how their attendance is, and I'll make a note that by following through with their studies and with improving their class attendance, something like that, they are addressing their educational barrier of non-high school graduate.
Great. Great. And do you, so since you're entering them on Friday, do you like record them by hand during the week so that you remember what you're entering, or kind of like type something in Excel, or how do you remember what it is that you're going to go back and put into the actual ENDMS?
Yes, if they're not in WIOA, I have to keep notes through the week. A lot of times for the youth that aren't in WIOA, I'll do it right then. Okay. However, most of my youth are WIOA, so I can go back through my case notes in this and I kind of copy and paste, and then I add to it so that it relates more to JMG.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay, thanks a lot. And Steve, I know that you're still kind of learning this stuff, but I did notice that you have very thorough model services, so I don't know if you have anything to add to what Deborah said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I guess that's about it. You know, I'm trying to tell a story and make it clear about what we're doing to help them overcome their barriers. That's pretty much it.
Sure, thanks.
You're welcome.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I don't really have much to add. I would say the main thing is I don't like having to keep track throughout the week because I do forget. So most of my kids are WIOA kids, and I will typically case note in MIS, and then I'll immediately just go into ENDMS and case note the same thing. But I also have some time carved out on Fridays to do any catch up with anything that I've missed. So that's the main thing. Mostly, I pretty much just agree with what Deborah says. Being as thorough as possible and trying to address the barriers, I think that's the best way to go.
Great, thank you. So that's really all we are covering for today. I just wanted to give you all any time now to ask any questions about this still. That document that I referred to, so this one, is in the out of school model channel on Slack. I'll also upload it to the general channel as well to make sure that you all have access to it. And just you can reference that if you ever just have any questions about model services out of school. Are there any questions before we wrap up? Okay, great. So follow up with me if you have any specific questions about this. We are kind of doing just like some general work to improve our model service entries. So some of you might be getting like a friendly reminder from me, but it's really not at all to be annoying or come down on you. It's just kind of like a reminder and asking if you need any support around this, just to make sure that we are truly reflecting the work that you're doing and just capturing it correctly. So thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to attend today, and we will hopefully see you all next week on the O&I. Have a great Wednesday, or Tuesday. Sorry, it's only Tuesday. It's a short week. Okay, bye, guys.
Thank you.